Hi, this is Professor Wetter. We're going to start by establishing a project, creating a Microsoft project, MSP2010. Here we're opening a file, we're creating a file. We're going to name it Building a House. That'll be our project name. Okay, we're going to start by typing in the phases. First we'll establish the project itself, build a house. Now we're going to put in phase 1. We're actually going to have 5 phases in this particular project, so I'm going to build all 5. We're going to call the phases initiate. Phase 2 is plan. Phase 3, execute. By the way, we're following PMBOK guidelines here in terms of phases. Phase 4 is monitor. Phase 5 is close. Once we have those established, we're going to go back. We're going to take, and we're going to, first of all, we're going to indent these. So we're going to nest just like we would nest folders in a standard file system. We're going to add third level items here, which would be specific tasks that we're going to follow. There's 2 ways of doing that. One is you can open up the task information panel, which I'm doing right now. I'm typing in the first task that we have there, which would be capital sourcing. You notice there's no other, we're not going to define the dependencies at this point. First we're going to set these projects up. The second item we have going on here is actually going to be a milestone. It's going to be capital approval. I'm going to create additional items here, additional tasks underneath each. This may take a minute or so. I want to complete the entire project. Obviously this is a very simple project, but I'm showing you how to build one so that we will be able to build a much bigger project. What we have here, we're following logical task here. We put in capital approval to start. Then we put in our develop the blueprint and approve the blueprint. For our execute, we're going to just simply say to build. We're also going to have an approval stage on the build. Each of these approval stages is a milestone. We'll show you how to capture those later. The monitoring phase will be basically an inspection phase. We'll get that put in here. Once we have the inspection, we'll also have the approval of the inspection. Keep in mind that the inspection probably is going to run at this very same time that the build is going to run. Now we haven't filled out any dependencies yet or any durations. We'll be doing that in a second. Finishing off the close. Now we've got to do a little bit more indenting here. Again, we want to nest things so that one follows the other. You notice I'm using the indent tools up above to indent. Notice too, now we don't have any times assigned here for the project. So the next step, we want to start entering durations. I'm just picking durations here that are somewhat logical. Obviously, we're just building this at a high level at this point in time. You notice that I've got 0 days for capital approval, and I'll put that for each of the milestones. In Microsoft Project, it'll default, your milestone will default to, the row will default to a milestone if you have a 0 duration, meaning that there's no time allowed for it. Notice how the milestone is listed here. It's just a diamond. That would signify that it's a milestone. And you notice we have, basically we've got all the tasks together here. We've got to start adding predecessors so that we can have some relationships here. Let's see how we... Just doing a little formatting here to get us ready for the next step. We're going to make the Gantt chart fit the page, just a little bit more visible for this demonstration. Before we go any further, we want to assign the project a start date. If you notice there it defaults to October. That's probably when I installed the Microsoft project on my local laptop. The very first task will default to the start date as being a dependency. So we're going to start with the next task. And also notice that we're issuing each duration at the lowest level task. So we always go to the level 3 in this particular case, which is the lowest level, and add the task and duration. There's multiple ways of adding the duration. We can go back to the task information bar and do it. And we can enter the specific task that we want. There is a drop down where we can pick which task is going to precede it. We find as in most applications that there are multiple ways of entering data. In this particular case, I'm just going to type it in, which is a quick way of getting through. As we get this completed, you'll see that we are drawing our Gantt chart a little bit differently because they're showing dependencies. So you've got lines that link your dependencies. You've got a graphical view of what's happening here. And because I started to show the dependencies, our time bar up here, we're going back to giving a visual display that's going to make it all appear on one screen. So now we have our project built, basically. As you can see on there, we have the black bar representing the highest level task. We have the bars underneath representing the specific duration of the task, and then you have the linkages from one task to another with the milestones in between, as you can see there. So now that we have our task, durations, precedence, we've got to go in and start assigning resources. For that, we're going to go to the Gantt chart. We're going to go to the resource sheet off the side there. We're going to start typing in our resources. What I've determined here for our project, we're going to have a couple of resources: an architect, a banker, a builder, closer, an inspector, and of course a project manager. Now we want to develop costs on this particular project, so what we're going to do is assign a work cost to each of these resources. For the architect, I'm putting in at 90, the banker at 100, the builder at closer at 8, the inspector, and the project manager. So I put different rates in there so we can just see the calculations as we're going through. Now we're going to go back to the Gantt chart view where we entered our data. Now it's not showing the resources over here because we have not assigned them to specific tasks. So again, I'm going to make the view appropriate. Now again, I'm going into our lower level task. I'm going to assign the resources. Here we have a banker resource. For approval, we often use a stakeholder. In this particular case, I'm going to use the project manager. Of course, the architect would be developing the blueprint. Again, I'm going to have the project manager approve it. In another scenario, we may use a stakeholder to approve. We may use different stakeholders. Obviously, the builder, again, the project manager is going to make that determination. Inspection, the inspector will be assigned. Project manager is going to verify that the inspection is complete. And at the end, we're going to have some closed task, which I'm not defining here the specifics of the closed task. We'll do that at a later point. Project manager is going to determine when it's complete. Now we're going to just show that we have the cost in there. I'm going to select the cost table in there, and there we have the cost assigned to the project. So we have each phase, each task, and it's all rolled up into one particular total cost for the project. Just checking through here to see if there's anything that was missed at all. If there's any corrections we need to make, we would make the corrections at this point in time. And we can also review the timeline again to make sure there's nothing erroneous there. Everything is in a waterfall fashion. So everything looks right. We have our milestones showing. We've got our start and end dates. This particular line represents the entire project. Each phase is represented by the subsections. Also to point out that the build and inspect run at the same period of time, and obviously we're going to build and inspect at the same point. One is not delayed for the other. So everything looks in order. You can also note across the top here we have an overall timeline with the various milestones listed there. This is a feature in project 2010. Voila, we are now complete with setting up our project.